Steph Therapy 911 presents Stephanie Samuel Straight Talk. Join us every Sunday at 7 p.m. live Eastern Standard Time on Facebook Live. It's real, raw, uncensored. And now, here is your host, Stephanie Samuel. Stop the stigma.
Welcome to Straight Talk, Stop the Stigma. I'm Stephanie Samuels, and today's a really cool day because I get to spend the next hour with truly one of my very favorite people, the whole world, who's looking mighty good today. So we'll wait until like all hell breaks loose in your background and what have you, which will be a typical Dawn moment. Anyway, so today's guest is Dawn Stevens. Dawn is the wife, now widow of Scott Stevens. Going to give you a little bit of background on Dawn, and she and I have had wonderful conversations for quite a few years, so we're going to let it flow. I think it's really important for all of us to be able to hear what she has to say, and cover a lot of issues that a lot of times people won't talk about, particularly after a line of duty death. So Dawn started her career in public safety in 1995 as a volunteer firefighter. You'll find that Dawn has a relatively non-traditional life, which is Dawn. She started working for the Lacey Township Police Department in New Jersey in 1996 as a Class 1 police officer. She started the Class 2 Police Academy, but injured her knee and was assigned to dispatch during rehabilitation. During that time, Scott, her soon-to-be husband, was also beginning his career in law enforcement, and they decided that having one officer was going to be enough in law enforcement, and that she was going to stay on as a dispatcher. She wore many hats while dispatching until she retired in August of 2015. She was the union president, trainer, TAC officer, emergency management, communications officer. She had met Scott, actually, when she was volunteering through the fire company. His parents and Dawn's had been a member. There was a 7-year difference, so when he came to the firehouse after she was 18 to visit a friend, they re-met, and as she says, the rest is history. Dawn was married for 16 years. I want to kind of give you it's an unusual situation in my years of doing what I do. This was kind of an unprecedented issue, which I think if you think about, on January 8th in 2015, Scott had an accident while Dawn was working alone with Lacey Township as a dispatcher, and her coworker had called out sick that day. And Scott did not pass until January 25th, 2015. I'm sorry, January 21st of 2015. So it was almost, 3 weeks, a little less than 3 weeks. Was it done 2 weeks? Less than 2 weeks. But one of the things that had occurred, and Dawn, I want you to, I'll set the scene, but I think it's important that you actually share the information so I don't screw it up, is that Dawn was working as dispatcher when a call came in that day. And Dawn took the call as she takes all calls. And I will share with you that I was privy to the conversation that from that day. I was given the tapes from it. And it was very clear that Dawn is a take charge woman, knows how to dispatch, how to make sure that scenes are appropriately handled, and that that medical attention is given. So Dawn, go ahead if you want to set the scene for the day or what have you, for the morning or.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, first off.
Absolutely, my honor.
Initially, when you asked me to come on, I was, sure, no problem. And then I thought about it and I was scared to death. And then all I've been saying, and then even my son said to me today when I said I was nervous, he said, "You're just talking to Stephanie. It's nothing. It's nothing. It's fine."
Steph.
It's just Stephanie. So that's all I'm thinking is I'm just talking to you. And it's just Stephanie. But on January 8th of 2015, my son was at the time, my husband and I had a little routine work when I was working days at the time. I would get up and leave for work around 6:30. I had to be at work at 6:45. He would typically stay home in the morning and get Scotty ready for school and get him off to school in the morning, and then go on with his day. I had received a call from a gentleman who came across a single vehicle, motor vehicle accident in a desolate area of our town in Lacey Township. The vehicle was off into the woods and there was nobody around it. And he stopped to check on the driver. The driver was unresponsive. I started a couple officers and first aid and fire company out that way. And
did you think anything, Dawn, at the time? Just another MVA?
At the time, one of the detectives that I worked with, he kind of heard, he had been a dispatcher early on in his career. Some of the best officers I worked with started as dispatchers. He had heard that I was up there by myself and busy, so he came up to sit with me and answer the phones and stuff. He came up for a little while, and after a while, he kind of meandered out, and at one point we got the plate number, and the plate number came back to a landscaping business from a town south of us. And my lieutenant at the time immediately got on the phone with the police department from that town to see if they could get some contact information for that business. And
so who called the plate in, Dawn? Did you call the plate in?
I want to say I either got the plate, I honestly don't remember, Steph. I think either the gentleman that found the car gave me the plate number, or one of the first officers there gave me the plate number. And you have to understand that my husband and I lived in this town our whole lives, grew up in this town, knew all the officers that we worked with. My husband at the time was assigned to the drug and gang unit, and he went to work every day dressed in regular clothes. He drove a car that would just fit in with any other car. The plates always came back to something that wasn't a typical police vehicle. So nobody realized it was Scott until they were getting him out of the car, and somebody found a police radio. Then somebody found, somebody finally was able to get his ID out of his pocket. And
what did you know at the time?
When I hung up the phone with the gentleman on the phone, he had told me that the person had stopped breathing. And I knew I was there by myself, and I was, shoveling shit against the tide, basically, trying to keep up with everything I had going on. Because obviously I had other stuff going on in the town too. It wasn't the only thing happening at that moment.
Right.
And I told the gentleman if anything changed before my officers got there to please call 911 back and give me a call back. But I disconnected with him. And
did you set up for medevac?
Yeah, the officers are, I'm sorry, I have a dog here that's being very needy, and he keeps
Not a surprise, really.
Yeah. One of my officers requested a medevac, and around that time, one of the people that my husband worked with, we had cameras all over the police station that I had a big screen that I could keep an eye on. And he showed up at the back door, which wasn't uncommon because the person that ran the drug and gang unit lived in our town. And those guys were always around. Had a very good relationship with our detective bureau. We're always going downstairs to talk to the detectives. And then my husband's boss showed up at the back door. And instead of coming inside and going directly downstairs to the detective bureau, he came up the hallway. And, you know, again, there's 1,000 things going on and I'm handling stuff. But it kind of like made me stop and think a second. And then I could see him on the hallway camera, and his demeanor completely changed. His hands are on his hips. He's bending over. He's grabbing his face. His body language is completely not normal. I actually got up from my desk. I opened the door and I peeked my head out in the hall and I said, "What are you doing here? Are you here to tell me my husband's dead?" And everybody's face just dropped. And I went back in and I sat back down and I'm doing my job. And then from there on, it kind of gets a little bit, one of the officers and the chief actually came in and it was like, they're walking towards me and I'm walking as far back as I can. So I'm basically up against the back wall of my office. And they're like, you need to come with us. And I'm like, is he okay? Is he okay? And they couldn't tell me anything, obviously. And it was like one of those things where they had to get the headset off of me to put it onto the officer that came into the room so that somebody could take over my job so that I could leave and go to the hospital. So that was a very sticky situation for them to have to figure out how to like extract me from the room, get an officer in off the road to take over my job. Because like I said, we worked 2 people on the desk at the time, but my coworker had called out sick that morning. So, a lot of stuff we had to work through with that, with why was I there? Why did it have to be me? Why was I the one that had to be sitting there? But it took me a little while, but I was able to turn that thinking around, that if I hadn't been the person sitting there, I'd still to this day be questioning who was there, if they did everything right, and if they did everything they could have done. And I know for a fact that I could have had a surgery suite and a neurosurgeon on the side of the road for him, and it wouldn't have made a difference with the type of injury he had. So,
and Dawn, you had managed, your world obviously was turned upside down immediately. And I've asked this before, I've had the opportunity to speak in front of widows groups. And one of the things that has always kind of shocked me, I'm not big, and you and I have discussed this many times about not believing in coincidences, is you and Scott had talked about pretty much everything.
mm-hmm.
So what had been set up for that, oh shit moment, should it ever happen? And what did you know? Because it was amazing what had been discussed. And in looking back, can you look back over the month before Scott died or whatever period of time and reference a conversation or something that, then became, wow, that's really interesting that the timing would be, and then Scott would end up dying.
Yeah. We talked about some pretty morbid stuff, doing what he did and what I did before he worked in the drug and gang unit. He was in the computer crime unit, which is a whole nother bag of worms. I don't know if we're going to get into that tonight, but we talked about a lot of stuff.
I'm going to let you go there. I'm going to let you go wherever you're comfortable.
Okay. But we talked about a lot of stuff, and, we would see line of duty deaths happen, and we would say, we really have to get our shit together. We have to get a will. We have to write stuff down. We have to put stuff in writing. But we have always said, and I've said, and he's said, and, I don't want to be laying in a hospital bed. I don't want to be hooked up to machines. I do not want, that is not quality of life. I do not want to be a vegetable. And that's basically what it boiled down to with him. was medevac to Jersey Shore Hospital on the 8th of January. He never regained any type of consciousness. He had a very traumatic brain injury. We had very dear friends of ours that got us a second opinion from Penn State Hospital people that came in and looked at his records as well and said that.
Penn State or U of Penn?
I'm sorry.
Remember. U of Penn?
You know how I am. But they were able to give us the
widow
same.
brain. Baby brain. Oh, good. Hi, everybody.
I called that one. I'm sorry. Sorry. We have a herd of dogs here. But they were able to give us the same. They said if we could transfer him here and give him a better care, we would in a heartbeat. But they are doing everything that we would be doing to support him. There's nothing that can be done. There's no surgery. There's nothing that can be done to help him get any better. We were faced with the task to either move to palliative care, which would have been basically making him comfortable and putting him on like a long-term life support and just basically waiting for him to die of some type of secondary infection or sepsis or some type of problem like that. Or we could take him off life support and let him be a organ donor, which we wound up doing. We wound up working with the organ donation people at Jersey Shore Hospital. And that wound up being such a beautiful silver lining through all of this. We found out so many people that Scott was able to help after he passed away. We actually heard from one of his kidney recipients about 2 years after she received his kidney. And then both his kidneys stayed in New Jersey. One went to a man in his 30s, one went to a woman in her 30s. And then we received a letter that his corneas went to a man in the town.
Oh, wow.
South of us. So we live in Lacey. A man in Waretown, New Jersey, got a sight restoring surgery with Scott's corneas. So you hear about people being organ donors and their organs and tissue and stuff like that going all over the place. And you hear about, oh, this one went to California here. His stuff stayed local. And like, I can't help but think to myself, there's a man that I could possibly be seeing in the ShopRite that's walking around with my husband's corneas that can still see, the sunrise. And maybe he goes to my son's football games and watches my son play football. I don't know, it's just.
So that was the other thing. You had to figure out how to navigate. You had a son.
Yeah.
And Scotty was how old at the time?
He was 10, just turning 11.
So what we know about children in concrete operations is 10 is about the age that they understand the permanency of death.
Yes.
So it's also kind of figuring out how to take care of him. And this isn't telling him that his dad just died, because his dad hadn't died. His dad was now in hospital. Figuring out when do we have him see him? How do we prepare what he's going to see?
Yeah.
You did such a great job. One of the things, Dawn, that I can't begin to tell you, that it was so important that you had really good guidance as far as making sure that you got the consultations, that, who is the best person to ask? How do I do this with my son? Do I bring him in? How do I bring him in? How do we set this scene? Do I get a second opinion? How do I include in-laws? How do I, deal with all of these extraneous variables? And as we all know, when it comes to line of duty deaths and officers injured, there are just tons of people.
That was another thing. Jersey Shore Hospital was amazing in the fact that they have a child life specialist team. I would assume that they're typically reserved for kids that are in the hospital and trying to navigate sickness and injury that the kids are there for. They were brought in to help us with Scotty navigate seeing his father in such a scary situation. You know, the amount of equipment and machinery that was just behind Scott in the hospital room, just to keep him going, was amazing. Scott had one of his friends, thank God for my friend Carrie. Everybody needs a Carrie.
Everybody needs Carrie. I can vouch for everybody needs a Carrie.
If you ever have to go through anything like this in life, everybody needs a Carrie. She was with me from minute one through everything, and she kept her daughter. Yeah, she kept her daughter home from school. Her daughter was a year older than my son, and they were basically like cousins from the time they were born, you know. And she kept Kaylee home from school when Scotty needed a little extra support and love. And, you know, we had this woman, Samantha, from the child life specialist team that would take them on scavenger hunts through the hospital and let them build these creations out of all this medical gear and, you know, all this stuff that she would do. And then one day we were sitting there in the family room. We basically took over. I felt I would always apologize to any of the other families that came out. I'm like, I'm so sorry, because there was always 20, 30 people there, because it was people that my husband worked with, people that I worked with, all of our family and friends. You know, everybody just wanted to be there for us, even though people couldn't see him. We could only see him 3 times a day, and it was only for like 15 minutes. One day the bank of elevators opened, and this gentleman with a therapy dog like stepped out and like looked around. He was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong floor." And I'm like, "Oh my God, a dog." And we are such big dog people. My son just like fell on the floor, and this dog, the man was like, "Well, apparently I'm on the right floor." He came and spent time with Scott every day that he was there. That man and his therapy dog actually came to my husband's funeral. And I can picture still in my mind my son laying on the floor in front of his father's casket with his therapy dog, and the child life study specialist people from the hospital came to see my son at the funeral as well. It was just very special. So,
So when you talk about having a Carrie,
mm-hmm.
it goes into something else. So Scott had made all the decisions.
Yes, I was one of those wives, and I can remember sitting in the hospital and Scotty couldn't get into Netflix. I didn't know how to do it. I didn't pay the bills. I didn't know the online passcodes. I didn't know how to do anything. I was even and fine until my son needed me, and I couldn't help him get into Netflix. I lost my shit.
Yeah.
Couldn't do it.
And watching you over the years, you know, go from being, and you're never a meek and mild woman. I certainly don't want to pawn you off that way, for God's sakes. Always that incredibly quick-witted sense of humor. But when it came to having to make a decision, how do you want to decorate? What do you want to put in the house? The finances, any of that stuff was so overwhelming because you hadn't done it. And now you're being handed, you know, kind of this world immediately that says all the decisions you're going to make in life are now yours.
Yes.
And you're going to make them for your son, 100%. You're going to make them with what you felt was going to be in your husband's best interest and what he would want, and balanced out by what you believed was in your best interest. And you and Scott, you and your dead husband now fighting over what was going to be best in your head for Scotty, and kind of how that gets navigated, and having to make those decisions and kind of your own growth. You know, one of the things that always stood out is the road to hell being paved by good intentions. Is, you know, when you're in that much pain and you can't figure out how to get out of it, pretty common to say, hey, here you go. I'm going to bring you your favorite bottle of wine. I'm going to bring you some beer, whatever it is. And sometimes I think that the police family doesn't understand that they go home, they leave you, and you're left with all of these emotions to deal with trauma. And that it becomes totally overwhelming for anybody. And kind of the importance of being able to figure out, how do you grieve? Because nobody wants to watch you grieve. And you still are the type of woman that you don't want anybody to see you hurting. You kind of want to, you're the one that will make sure everybody else is okay. You'll go into the hospital as your husband is on life support, knowing the decision is going to be made, and you're going to make sure everybody else is okay. You'd be like handing out brownies.
Mm-hmm.
Is what happens when you're behind closed doors, you're alone, you have a son, and you realize Scott's not coming home.
Mm. Not pretty.
Yeah. And yet you also did something that a lot of widows don't do, or don't do quickly, and that is that you chose to talk to somebody.
I think one of the best things I did was, one of the police officers that I worked with insisted that I come speak to you. And it was the day after my husband's accident, I was driven to your office. So
you weren't capable of driving for quite some time. I mean, you did not want to drive.
No. Yeah. No, I didn't drive for months and months.
And it's interesting because why people come into therapy is not necessarily why they stay in therapy. And I'll always say that, that there's the immediacy of a crisis. And then, people don't realize that there's a whole lot of navigating kind of life beyond that. And one of the more unusual things that you had to decide, which is so rare as we know, was your career ending as well?
Yeah. I left work in my uniform straight to the hospital. So like I've said to people in the past, I was an okay wife. I'm all right mom, I'm okay friend, pretty shitty daughter half the time, But I would put my uniform on, go to work. I was like a really good dispatcher. I have no qualms about saying that. I was very good at my job, and I loved my job. And I left work that day, was driven to Jersey Shore. And I think because I still had my uniform on, I was still in that mode, walking in. There was all people my husband worked with there. It's very surreal. And we were able to get my mom to go and pick my son up from school because we were afraid that he might hear about it. Mm-hmm. And we were able to shield him from that. I said to my mom to take his phone away. And we didn't think about the iPad. And on our way home from the hospital to come home and talk to Scotty that night around 9:00, he had his iPad and had apparently, in the house with the Wi-Fi, one of the messages that was meant for me was on his iPad. And he kind of came to my mom with big, eyes like, what's going on? And my mom had to kind of fill him in on what was happening. So it was not the optimal way I wanted to tell my son what was going on, but it was the way it happened. But so January 8th was the accident, and August 1st is when I officially put in for retirement. A lot went on during that time. some of the people I worked with donated some of their time to keep me out longer than I had time to stay out for. I just really had thoughts that I really doubted my ability to even do my job anymore. And a couple months after Scott's accident, two of the officers that I was very friendly with, still, very friendly with, were involved in an incident. And I got a call like 3 or 4 in the morning to tell me that there was an incident, that the officers were at the hospital, but they were okay. And it was like right then that I realized that I didn't think I'd be able to return to my job, because I couldn't like handle the fact that they were telling me something happened and I wasn't even there. You know what I mean? I couldn't. And until I got to see the officers and like physically put my hands on them, give them a hug, and know that they were okay with my own 2 eyes, it was not.
You really labored over that. I mean, that was.
Yeah, I loved my
so
job.
Difficult.
I loved my job.
And the other part is, before all this, you had kind of had a fantasy of being a stay-at-home mom. I mean, that was something that you had, like, it kills me listening to you say about, you're an okay, mom, or a bullshit. I'm calling bullshit, because you are an amazing mom, because you're a real mom. You're not one of those, rainbow and puppy moms. You're just, you're real, you're funny as hell. And you didn't sugarcoat anything, with Scotty. I mean, you really had to deal with some of the most difficult topics that anybody has to deal with. And that became as significant, more so, was if I retire out of dispatching, like if I don't retire out of dispatching, then Scotty, has a working mom that has, some funky hours, and dad's gone. And how do I figure out how to do this the best that I can? And you were the type of mom that a kid could flourish with. You weren't going to sugarcoat it. You weren't going to, to put on any different of a face than the woman that you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that became significant. And picking Scotty was easy. You would always pick Scotty. It was now, I think you had a lot of guilt, and please, correct me, that you were now going to be able to be a stay-at-home mom because of the system that New Jersey has. People don't realize, that's the other thing, that line of duty deaths are kind of interesting, because the wall in Washington is controlled by the FOP, on whose name gets up there. The PSOB money is overseen by the federal government, and pensions is overseen by your state.
Right.
So we can have people whose names are on the wall who haven't gotten PSOB money. We can have names on the wall that there's not an accidental disability. Like, there's all different algorithms.
So many variables. And
it's difficult. And yet with you were given not only those, but now came the most interesting part, was we were now going to be retiring you from your public service position as a dispatcher. Now, should you have been a dispatcher in Galway, you would not have been able to pension out, because the incident, the reason that you were able to get a pension was because it was you that took the call. And I remembered the decision being made to send the audio tape to pensions. And I remember you very distinctly saying to me, you remember what you asked me to do?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You did tell me, I wanted you to listen. Well, I wanted to listen to the tapes, but you wouldn't let me. But I wanted to make sure, I wanted to know if we could hear anything on there of Scott.
Well, I would let you listen. You wanted to, I mean, it was just a matter of, was there anything on there?
Right. You didn't think the benefits outweighed the risks, basically. You didn't want me to subject myself to that again.
There was nothing on there.
Right.
There was nothing on there. I mean, but you also wanted the person's name, because you
Oh,
wanted,
yeah. Yeah.
that was the most, yeah, you wanted two things. You wanted to know if I'd listen, that if there's anything with Scott, which there was not, and then you wanted to know that individual's name, because what did you want to do?
I wrote him a letter.
Yeah.
And I thanked him for being there with my husband.
Yeah.
Playing with him.
And that's you, you
Mhm.
know, that's you, just making sure that you circled back to make sure that people knew how much you appreciated.
Yeah.
And that was quite something. And although we don't know the ending, we do know that you sent the letter, and that was,
Yep.
that was that. One of the things that's come up with widows many times is, when is it okay to move on? Because in the public eye, because line of duty deaths, you became a queen with all eyes on you.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like? Because you're kind of under the radar, kind of bag of dicks kind of gal.
That's me.
You know, who just doesn't necessarily want the publicity.
Yeah. Like I said, we lived in this town. I worked for the town. We grew up in this town. You know, small town mentality where when this all first happened, if I didn't have my people, if I didn't have Carrie and you and people that were talking sense into me, I wanted to pull Scotty out of school, get an RV, get all the dogs, all the tattoos. I wanted to have a baby. I wanted all this crazy stuff. Like, I just wanted to just take off, drive off into the sunset. I'll teach him in the RV, you know. Didn't even want to be around here because it was awful. You would go into ShopRite or go into Wawa or go into anywhere, and it's the sad eyes everywhere you went.
And if you didn't look sad enough,
I know, there was, you know, God forbid something was funny and I laughed, and then I was like, well, am I giving people the wrong impression? You know, what's going on here? You know, a lot of, obviously, being from a small town, you hear things, and some things that people say are not very nice, but it's their opinion, not mine, and I really don't care. So let them have their opinions.
So we would tease, and what would I always tease you? What when I needed certain things, I would say, do me a favor.
The widow, Dawn Stevens.
So come on, I need the entire inflection. Go ahead. I need the widow, Dawn Stevens. Please enter the room.
The widow, Dawn Stevens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that became, because you have a magnificent way of being able to find humor in things, which I think has truly been your savior.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it hasn't made it any easier to be a widow, to be a young widow.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and yet one of the really nice things was finding somebody, because it sucks dating an officer's widow. Yet you found somebody who can accept the fact that You go to the grave often. You will always love Scott.
Yep.
You're able to talk about him openly. It's not this, shh, we're not going to talk about the dead husband. Like
Yeah.
somehow or another, if you don't talk about the dead, it makes it easier. Like, don't we know that they're dead?
No, you can't. I like to say, we love to hear Scott's stories. When people find old pictures or people tell us old stories, we love it. It doesn't make us sad, it makes us happy. Scotty loves it. He just got a job. He's meeting people that knew his dad back in the day, and he's hearing stories from people that, every day he comes home with a new story. So it's awesome. And like you said, dating someone that's very accepting, couple times without even asking, he's gone to the cemetery and put down mulch or planted flowers or done different things, had hats made with my husband's badge emblem on it. He's very good.
Yeah.
He's very good in that respect.
So what do you do with rings? What do you do with all of the crap that widows struggle with? I know that, when I was lecturing with widows, and I think I shared the story, she had this honker of a ring on, and she's talking about, going out on different dates and stuff. And I finally said to her, I'm like, well, you can't be going out on dates with that shit all over your hand. She's like, oh, no, I saved these for the widow event. So she's showing up at the cop stuff with that on, and kind of addressed, that.
I wound up taking off my wedding ring and my engagement ring set thing and putting it away to give to Scotty when he would like to have it someday. And I wound up buying myself a ring that I wear on that finger that has like the eternity sign.
Mhm.
Just something I wear because I think it's nice that I have it there and I know what it means, and it's, but I keep Scott's, Scott had given me a badge with his shield with his badge on it. The date is, and I'm getting to the point where the almost 44-year-old eyeballs need glasses, but I'm refusing to do it. 2012, he had given me this for Christmas. And it says, always with you on the back. So I wear this and his wedding band. And he had gotten a St. Michael medal from a victim of a case when he was in computer crimes that he had always kept. And I put it on there, and I wear this. I wear this a lot. I had it on the original chain that he had originally had it on, and I got a longer chain maybe 2 years ago. But I don't know. I just kind of feel like I always have them with me when I have it on.
And I think I think it's so important for people to understand there's no right way or wrong way of grieving.
Grief is very personal. It is as individual as a fingerprint. I like to tell people, grieving ain't easy. They should put that on a shirt because everybody's road is different. Scotty and I's journey is different than other people that we've met along the way. I really try to be the silver lining person with everything. We've met so many families of fallen officers over the years because of COPS, which is Concerns of Police Survivors. They are a national organization that help the families, the surviving families, and I'm not just talking wives and kids, I'm talking brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, co-workers. They take care of everybody. They help the families navigate everything. They have wonderful retreats and classes and all sorts of stuff all throughout the year. Unfortunately, with COVID this year, everything got canceled. They have kids camp for a week for the kids every year, and then every year we do a spouse retreat in September, but that got canceled for this year. We're supposed to be doing it virtually. And then locally, we have Garden State Cops, which they will mobilize when there's a local line of duty death. So gonna give a little shout out to Lisa Pressler, who, when my husband died, she was the president of the Garden State Cops chapter here. And she showed up at my husband's funeral, I can remember, and, you know, said something to me and gave me paperwork, and, you know, my girlfriend took it. But her and the president of the Lacey PBA at the time came to my house, sat at my kitchen table, and helped me navigate through all of the paperwork is involved with
Right.
line of duty death, which is like overwhelming. It's just, if it wasn't for them, I don't know how I would have gotten through all of that. So it's definitely a village mentality when it comes to this kind of stuff. It's not a club that I wish anybody a membership to, but if I had to punch a card to any club, I'm really glad that I have the family, the Blue family that I have now. I have family in the entire country, all over, that I can call on at any time for anything. The amazing people that I've met through everything that we've gone through is amazing. And like I know I've said to you, if you put your problems in the middle of a circle when you're with people, and everybody puts their problems in, you will gladly take your problems back. Because, not to compare yourself to other people, but in the scheme of things, we are so lucky. My son got almost 11 years with his dad. You know, he remembers his dad. You know, we've met so many families along the way that the wives were pregnant with their children when the husband passed away. The kids don't remember their fathers, or they were very, very young when their fathers passed away. They have no, you know, recollection of their dads. Scott has almost 11 years of great memories with his dad. And, you know, we were very, very fortunate in that fact that in the grand scheme of things, we're very lucky.
Scotty had wanted you to marry a cop.
Yes. So in one of our little family sessions that I and Scotty had together, I sat back and tried to remain as calm as possible as you and Scotty had a little conversation. And then when that came out, I kind of popped forward and said, "What?" I was so surprised at that that's what he wanted. He had wanted me to find a relationship with another police officer.
Yeah.
And he indicated that it was for, you know, feeling safe and being taken care of, and that whole
for you to be taken care of, like that this would be what he wants for you, so that, you know, in some ways, so that he could now kind of relax.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it was a great perspective, because at that moment you hadn't had that perspective coming from his eyes,
Mm-hmm.
and he in return did not have the perspective that you now gave him. And your comment was,
I didn't want to subject myself to that again. I didn't want to be waiting for the, you know, person to come home from work and hear the Velcro and the whole, you know, I didn't want to be that wife again, waiting for the officer to come home from work and worrying if they were out on the job, if they were going to come home, you know?
yeah, it just is a really interesting perspective. You know, you gave me so much. You know, one of the things I remember after the Dallas shooting, which was then 2016, July 7th. I remember your words, and we were talking about something, and you said, there's 5 new widows that I'll be meeting this year. And I hadn't, it's just, again, it's that perspective, that your world changed and that you think about that. And that wasn't obviously, what I was thinking about. It just hit me square between the eyes of like, my God, and that Scotty was going to be meeting new kids, like all that. The carnage, the true, unseen, unspoken for most of the time, carnage that gets left behind. And when you go down to the wall, in that first year is really the only year where you've got all the widows that are sitting in front of the stage or what have you when names are called out. So it doesn't seem like it's so much. And yet when you walk the memorial. And I remember one of the officers just making, who does the Unity tour every year, he just made such a profound statement. And he said, this is the only memorial down here that will never be complete.
And that's a very sad truth.
And I just thought, I had never thought about that. I never thought about, the Vietnam War, horrendous, but over with. The names aren't being added. World War II, like everything else down there is done. And yet to have to make arrangements for years and years and years from now, where does it go? Where do the names, get put? And it's just, it just kind of, and I think that really came to fruition also when you said, there's 5 new widows that I'm going to be meeting. What do you think in hindsight? What do you think helped you the most? What do you think helped you the least? And maybe not the one, but kind of the few things.
Well, definitely finding someone like you. I'm not saying,
It does not have to be me. Absolutely. Just somebody who gets it.
And little side note, when and if you're looking for someone, you are basically, you're shopping for someone. You're, it's a purchaser and if you're not happy, find somebody new. When Scotty was having, I insisted that he go speak to somebody. He didn't want to go. He didn't want to go. So basically I made the appointment. I got him in the car, and on the way there, I told him where we were going. He was not happy with me, but I digress. He stuck with it, and he finally, the woman sat me down and said, we're not a good fit. He's just sitting there. I'm not getting anything out of him, fine. So with my COPS people, some of the Southern moms were telling me that their therapists for their children were more of a hands-on type of people, where instead of just sitting next to each other, across from each other,
the traditional type of
non-traditional, where they were taking their kids out to shoot a BB gun and talk, right, or going to play basketball and talk, or going to throw a fishing pole and talk. So Stephanie put it out on her listserv, and we found a therapist for Scott that was willing to take a walk on the beach and talk, go out for lunch and talk. We went to Great Adventure one day, and I sat on the chair at the water park, and they went and did all the water rides while they did their talking. He was great. I also found a group for Scott that was not law enforcement related. It was just a grief support group for children. They are wonderful people. There's so many resources out there if you just look for them.
And it's understanding what you need, what your son needs, and knowing that, it can fit. The worst thing in the world is to try and fit a square peg into a round hole because everybody says, well, it fit for me. Well, damn it, it's not fitting. No. Move on.
Yep.
And a good therapist would absolutely say, I will help you find somebody who's a better fit than I am. And that one woman did truly a solid, what every therapist or professional should do, which is, this isn't working and I want to make sure you and your son get your needs met, because that's who it's about.
Yes, absolutely.
So if you could redesign the things that didn't work well, that you wish maybe the department knew, and you could design kind of a how to help a family, what would you have done differently or asked people to do differently? You know, I know for me, I have an issue with bringing over alcohol. Not that people necessarily have an issue with alcohol. It is a central nervous system depressant that you're putting into an already depressed body, and is awesome when it comes to helping with sleep, numbing up, and all the things, having nothing to do
But
with.
when you wake up and you sober up, guess what?
They're still dead.
They're still dead, and you still have to deal with what you have to deal with. And there's no going around it. You have to go through it. You know, there's no avoiding it. If you just keep avoiding it, it's just going to get.
So what would you ask somebody to bring? If you now get a phone call, there's a widow, and the department calls you up and says, Dawn, we need your help. How do we handle this? What do we set up for this family? From soup to nuts, what do you tell them?
Honestly, like I said, met a lot of people along our journey here, and I've heard some great stories and I've heard some horror stories. We were very lucky. They knew we had a house full of dogs. They took care of getting somebody in to take care of the dogs whilst we were in the hospital, and you know, I didn't have to worry about anything. My girlfriends, God love them, they didn't come over with a bunch of food and stuff. They put their money together. They got somebody to come clean my house. And it wasn't just one or two times. It was like for months and months and months.
Cutting the lawn.
Yeah. Come cut. You know what else? Scott died in January. People were showing up. People were fighting over to plow our driveway. It was like, who could get there first, and when it snowed. It was great.
Practical stuff that needs to be done, and not the grand gestures. You know, I mean, people, you know, it's lovely to have GoFundMe pages, but you need some concrete stuff immediately. And being able to have, you know, those carriers in your life, the people who, you know, fit. And you have different people that meet different needs. And what you find, particularly in line of duty deaths, is everybody wants to know the widow Dawn Stevens. Oh, I knew Dawn. Oh, I know Dawn really well. I was really close with Scotty. It's like a goddamn bus accident where, you know, people that were walking in the street jump onto the bus and I saw the bus, I got hurt too. Mm-hmm. And that becomes also really disheartening for you as the widow, is to listen to these people telling stories of how close they are either to you or your family, who you know little about.
You got that one. Yeah. But you know what? I know the truth, and my son knows the truth. So at the end of the day, that's what matters. I don't lose any sleep over it.
Yes, I know that.
One other thing, because I know we're probably going to be wrapping up soon. One other thing I wanted to discuss. I have gone to the police academy with another widow friend of mine. She was in the fiance capacity when her officer passed away. So we have very different stories. Right. And I implore people, officers that are listening right now, whether you're a new officer, whether you've been an officer for 30 years, make sure your beneficiary information is correct and up to date. So if you are a 20-year-old officer getting hired and you put down your mother as your beneficiary, and now 5 years later you're engaged and you know you don't change your beneficiary information, you know, you have to take care of who you want to be taken care of.
Right.
And that needs to be, unfortunately, what's on paper is what's going to be followed. And, you know, we were fine beneficiary wise in our department, but like I said, my friend who was the fiance at the time, she had a terrible time with her fiance's mother. Basically just got locked out of her house, and
There are so many stories, and it goes beyond just that line of duty death. It's all that's the tip of an iceberg. It's all the stuff that lies truly beneath that water that is so cold,
yeah,
so unsettling, and that's where the lethality is. Typically survive when you're on top of an iceberg, rarely when you're underneath it. So being able to kind of make sure that all those ducks are in order, as well as your attitude has been truly amazing. You have always been somebody that gives back. Here, just by you coming on today, and and knowing, I'm going to take you back to your worst day in your life, and yet I know you well enough to know that you'll pretty much do anything if it will benefit others, to be able to get the word out, to be able to say, if you see me, don't avoid me.
right.
I am allowed to smile. I will be more than happy to talk about Scott. I love talking about Scott. I have not forgotten that my husband's dead. People always amaze me because they'll avoid you because they don't want to talk about it, like they're going to remind you of something that you had forgotten about.
Right.
So, being able to have open communication, being able to, tell departments, there are times when enough is enough. Renaming streets has been an issue for widows, that then just avoid the damn street. Or every year we've got to do this fundraiser, and if God forbid you don't show up, then you're a bitch. So it's blaming the victim. It's like, no, departments need to be able to ask the widows and the family, is this causing you more pain than good? Because the road to hell is paved by good intentions. Everybody wants to show you how much they're honoring and how much they love, that officer. And yet they don't think about what it was like for the officers that were on that scene that day, those that still continue to do that job, the family members that, that their world stopped that day. So really, it comes down with just about, like in everything else in our lives, what do we bitch about is good communication. Is you've got to be able to, don't make decisions for the widow Dawn Stevens. Let Dawn make decisions. And you were always good about saying, I can't make that decision. But you do have go-tos.
I do.
That can make those decisions for you.
And I've gotten much better at making decisions over the last 5.5 years.
You sure as hell have. You sure as hell have. And that's just it. You needed help for a little while, but as time passed and you grew into the woman that you are, the woman that you needed to become, you took back all that you needed to, and you left the shit that you didn't. And that's the strength.
Yeah.
You got an awesome kid, which, Scotty is just truly amazing.
Kids are very resilient. I've learned that. And kids model what they say.
Yes.
So he's a lot like me, where he goes and goes and goes and goes and goes. And then every once in a while, he's like, all right, yeah, my dad's dead. And he kind of has a moment, which is fine. I'm a lot like that. I kind of go and go and go and go and then have a moment, but we tend not to have our moments at the same time, and we're there for each other, which is great. So
what you want people to know in closing, what is it that you would want anybody to know about widows, line of duty deaths, or what have you?
Looking back on the time that Scott was in the hospital and during his funeral planning and stuff like that, I kind of wish I was involved a little bit more in the planning of some things with the funeral. and that kind of stuff. It was a lot. It was very, obviously just big, you know, it was a lot. But you know, we got through it. It's just, it's such a blur. It feels like so long ago, but it also feels like yesterday when I think about it.
Yeah.
But I also will say, and this really has it to do with anybody that has a loss, you know, it's great to be there for them right then and there, and you know, the funeral, the everything like that. But reach out to them after, you know, put a little reminder in your phone when it's going to be their person's birthday or the day that they passed, and just send them a text or a call and just say, hey, you know, we're thinking of you, we're thinking of your person. Just it goes a long way.
Great advice.
So we
True.
know that our loved one's not forgotten. That's all we want. We just don't want them to ever be forgotten, you know.
Absolutely. Thank you. You are amazing. You are truly amazing. So, all right. And next week, actually, we're going to end up having a widow from an officer that died by suicide. So Cassie Auburn will be joining us, which is, you know, which is the other side in some ways, a similar situation, and yet kind of how things get handled differently. And yet mourning is mourning.
Mm-hmm.
So, and truly, these Facebook lives could not be done without Robbie and Randy Curtis, who have my back always, and Emily and Tyler, who don't abandon me either. Part of it is because one of them is my kid and she can't abandon me. The other one is, if he wants to continue to date my kid, he better abandon me. So anyway, Dawn, hang on 1 second. I'm going to shut down. Of course, I'll let you eat in a moment, but hang on 1 sec.